I've bought and sold around 9 motorcycles in the last 4 years to make videos on this channel, and I've only lost money on one of them, my Yamaha MT-09 surprisingly. And that is what gave me the confidence to attempt this challenge with the GS.
I challenged myself to find a motorcycle for a good deal and buy it. Take the bike on a memorable trip with my girlfriend, then clean the bike up and sell it for a profit to fund the trip I just went on, covering all my expenses from hotels and fuel all the way to insurance, therefore returning my bank account back to its original balance and rendering my trip free. In the first episode, I did some online bike shopping and found my blue whale, less commonly known as a 2013 BMW R1200 GS with 67,000 kilometers on it for only $5,400. We then took it into the mountains on our first ever road trip in the second episode, had a great weekend, and the GS performed flawlessly.
But suddenly, my confidence from only losing money on one of my last 9 bikes is waning, because now it's time for the final step of the plan, cleaning the GS up and trying to sell it for a profit. And to be honest, I think it's going to be more difficult than I initially thought.
First, we have to address our budget. Remember, the bike was $5,400 and I boldly assumed I could sell it for $6,000 when I'm done with it, meaning I worked off of a budget of $600, and it didn't take me long to blow through all but $12.82 of that budget.
At first, I was impressed. We actually did it. But now I've got bad news. Well, 2 sets of bad news. The first bad news is that I've now owned the GS for more than a month, which means it's another insurance bill of $33.56, dipping us into the negatives. The second bad news is that the GS now has a light on the dash that's going to affect its resale value.
The service light, to be more specific.
When I first saw it, I was annoyed. It's only done 7,000 kilometers since its last service, and the intervals on these are 10,000, so it's not quite there yet. Turns out it wants an annual service because it's been a year since the last one. Annoying, but no big deal. I figured I'd just change the oil, reset the light, and be on my way. After all, its last service was a major one, so all it needs now is a basic one. Sure, the oil and filter will eat into our budget a bit, but that's fine. What else can we do? I don't need to pay BMW to do something simple, but that's easier said than done. I looked into resetting the light, and basically you only have 2 options. You can either take the bike to BMW, who will then charge you for a full service, or buy a special tool that is $600.
Long story short, I'm selling it with the service light on.
I know it's stupid, but I'm going to lose money either way, so we'll just negotiate on the price a bit to compensate for the service light. But we're most likely not going to get the full $6,000 for the bike now. But nevertheless, something that BMW might let me do myself is wash the bike, unless there's a light for that as well and a surcharge.
Luckily, because it's filthy after our trip, there are tons of splattered bugs on it and the wheels are grubby.
But that's just the dirt that I've added.
When I got it, it already had tons of dirt in its cooling fins here. There's tar residue on this front engine cover, the headers are rusty, the brake discs are dull, and all the black trim has been dulled by the sun, hence why I thought a good clean could make it look a lot better. So I started with the basics, a good old snow foaming to soften any splattered bugs stuck to the bike, so we can get them off without scratching it anymore by using a pressure washer. And anyone who is against pressure washers has just never used one. But this didn't do much for the wheels, they were still filthy. And this is your sign not to skimp on cleaning products, because look how crap this spray is. And to think it's called Perfecto. But 3 days later, it was applied front and back. My very expensive dish brush worked well to get in between all the spokes, and I used a cloth on the stubborn areas, making sure to get in all the nooks and crannies, because those are the areas that differentiate between a clean bike and a very clean bike. Next up was the tar residue on the engine. Believe it or not, I started with some oven cleaner I had lying around, paired with a Scotch-Brite pad. I then switched to clean green and a toothbrush to get into the grooves. It made a difference, but wasn't perfect.
There are 3 types of bikers. Those who don't care if a bike is dirty, those who will pay more for a clean bike, and those, like me, who can see the potential underneath the dirt on a motorcycle. and see it as an opportunity to get a bike for cheaper. I know some people don't believe that giving a bike a good clean adds value to it, but in my opinion, it makes a bike look like it has been better cared for, which is exactly what you should be looking for when shopping for used bikes.
Then it was on to the rusty headers. I covered them in Harpic toilet cleaner and let it sit for 5 minutes to eat away at the rust before scrubbing them with the Scotch-Brite pad, and this was probably the easiest transformation so far. They came out looking great, but we'll still give them a polish once it's back inside. The dirty cooling fins really bother me. This is just years of laziness and makes the bike look way worse. So I hit it with clean green and let it soak. I used a round paintbrush as a detailing brush to get in between the fins and got a surprising amount of grime off. But unfortunately, any other brush I tried was either too wide or the bristles too short to get in there. I then attempted to get the brake discs to shine again, but I underestimated the stubbornness of this dirt. Another small thing that's been bothering me is residue left from a decal on the top box. A quick and easy fix to make it look better, and after all that, I gave the bike a regular wash. Back inside, I turned my attention to all the black plastic. This is blackback, which you wipe on to any black trim pieces, let it soak for at least 30 minutes, and it supposedly dyes the plastic and makes it look darker again. And the GS has a lot of black plastic on it, some of which looks better than others. I would like to have done the switchgear as well, but it was too intricate and I would have dyed all the buttons black too. While waiting for the blackback to soak in, I polished the sidewall of the tires because black tires look less used in my opinion. The same can be said for the seats, so I used some detailing spray on them too, so now they're shinier but slippery, as well as the trim on the dash and top box. And finally, I polished the rusty areas of the headers with some Autosol metal polish. First, I tried with the trusty Scotch-Brite pad, but ended up using steel wool because it left a better finish. By then, it was time to buff off the blackback, which worked wonders on some sun-bleached areas and less well on others, like the handguards, that it just made streaky, so I had to go back over it a second time to fix this.
Overall, I have to say that I greatly underestimated the stubbornness of dirt on an adventure bike. Areas that usually scrub up clean with relatively little effort just never come up clean on this bike. I guess 67,000 kilometers of all types of different terrain will do that to a bike. So it was a learning exercise for me too.
And I also spent $19.08 on cleaning products that weren't already in my cupboard. But you can't deny that it does look a lot better than when we started. It might look underwhelming on camera, but I've been staring at this dirt for the past month and think it looks 10 times better.
So if I expect to sell this bike for more than I bought it for, I guess I do have to consider changing out any worn or damaged parts. But the truth about flipping a bike for profit is that unless you find a bike with a catastrophic issue that is actually a cheap fix for an experienced mechanic, you're not going to make a ton of money by just changing out worn parts or giving it a clean. For example, this windscreen is pretty scratched up, but I don't think it's worth replacing it. A new screen costs around $150, but I don't think that we can increase the price of the bike by that much if we were to replace it. The rear tire is the same. It might be very squared off, but it still has plenty of tread left on it. And I don't think that we could increase the price of the bike by as much as a new tire would cost. I'd rather negotiate with a buyer on these areas than spend more of our budget. Not that we have any left. The truth is, the only reason I think I can profit off of this bike is because I got it for a pretty good deal. You see, the guy I bought this from also had a KTM 1190 Adventure that had a blown motor. So he bought this as its replacement. However, his friend then offered to rebuild the KTM for cheap, so he got his KTM back. And then he just wanted to get rid of this as quick as possible, so I benefited.
So now for the moment of truth, let's take some pictures of the bike and put it up for sale. I thought having the bike against this black door would look cleaner than a cluttered garage, but I was wrong. and this is probably where my sales struggle started. But I did make sure to get all sides to prove there's no damage hiding and proof of the odometer.
So now I need to accentuate its good points and gloss over its negatives in the description.
This bike does have some nice features. It has a full service history, but needs one now. It has the nice LED headlight, nav mount, electronic suspension, heated grips, all the recalls have been completed, and a top box.
Now about price. I'm not going to be too ambitious since we had some setbacks. I'm gonna put it up for the original $6,000 that I planned on and just hope that I get some decent offers. But obviously in my local currency, not dollars.
And now we wait, which gives us time for a mini GS review since I've had it for a few months now. The truth is that I'd love to have a GS in my dream fleet, but not this one. First of all, sullying it was always the plan, so I'm not going to change my mind. But I'd also want a different color, lower mileage, and cruise control if I were to keep it. But I think I figured out why everyone loves the GS. Simply because it defies the negative assumptions you make about it. When you look at it, it looks big and heavy, slow and terrible off-road. So then when you ride it, you're pleasantly surprised. It's relatively competent in all areas, as opposed to a superbike, where we watch the likes of Marc Marquez ride the wheels off them, and then we're surprised and disappointed when we can't do the same. This bike was also a lot of firsts for me in terms of ownership. It was my first BMW, first ADV, first single-sided swing arm, first time trying heated grips, first bike with electronic suspension, obviously first telelever suspension, first boxer, first time with a center stand, and first bike without a chain. I also don't know why BMW has focused on making the engine more powerful. This is plenty powerful and fast enough in my opinion, way better than you'd expect. Trying to decrease its weight would be a way better use of resources, but luckily I think that's finally what they're trying to do with the new 1300. However, I couldn't ride this bike every day. Not because it's bad, but because I'm too small and weak for it. I dread having to push it around or park it because of that. And although it's relatively good at everything, it's not exciting at any of them.
Someone suggested that I add the GS to the scoreboard that I started for reviewing bikes, and I like that idea, so here it goes.
I'm going to score the GS out of 10 for 6 categories to give us a total out of 60, and that's how it will be ordered on the board.
Styling. I don't think it looks bad at all. I love the LED headlight and the sheer size of it is very manly. However, it has zero sex appeal, so 7 out of 10. Practicality. It's the very definition of jack of all trades. However, its weight does hold it back a bit for short people like me, so for that, 8 out of 10. Fun. It really depends on how you ride it. It can be scary on proper off-roading, lovely on a sand road, perfect for touring, and even enjoyable on some twisty roads. But it's definitely not my go-to for fun. 6. Price. These liquid-cooled 1200s are pretty good value for money now that they're 3 generations behind, but there are still cheaper options, so 7 out of 10. Speed. Above average thanks to its displacement, but it's not known for speed. 5. Sound. 3. Enough said.
Giving it a total of 36 out of 60, which sounds harsh when you add it up, but rules are rules. Placing it underneath the MV Turismo Veloci, but hey, that's still 3rd place.
But now, back to business.
The first week was dull. At $6,000, I got nobody even sending me the traditional lowball offers. So for week 2, I dropped the price by $250, which got more attention.
One dealer offered me $4,500, and a few others tried to get me to put it on their floor as consignment stock, but I chose to keep riding it instead. In the 3rd week, I kind of forgot about it. I got a few offers of $5,000, but I wasn't that desperate yet, so I sat tight. But after an entire month, I started to get antsy. I think I figured out the problem though. I chose the GS because they're insanely popular here, so I thought it would sell quickly. But just about every second bike you see here is a GS, so I think everyone who wants one already has one. The market is just saturated. It's the only explanation.
You guys know the joys of Marketplace. Loads of people ask if it's still available, and you never hear from them again. You get ludicrous lowball offers. One guy offered me an F800 GS.
Which is weird because I already have a bigger GS.
Someone offered me a mountain bike.
Which was tempting, I'm not gonna lie.
And another dude offered me a crap boat.
I mean, I can already swim.
But in the end, I convinced a lowballer to go up to $5,400, which is what I bought the bike for.
So yes, I failed. And that rendered just about the whole challenge pointless. But in the end, I just wanted to get rid of it so that I can move on to the next project. And yet, I'm not that disappointed.
My plan failed and I lost $600 on a weekend away as a result. But technically, I got to ride a GS on a trip for free. I didn't lose any money on the bike. I got to experience a GS and make memories with my girlfriend.
I also haven't lost hope in this idea. I still strongly believe that you can get a free trip by profiting off of flipping a bike, just not this bike. And I probably need to spend less on hotels. But I'm not giving up on this idea.